Hello, everyone. Welcome to Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. Music for the adventurous listener. I'm your host, Janna Sailor, and on today's episode, we are continuing our celebration of Black History Month. I'm interviewing Canadian-Jamaican composer, pianist, educator, voice actor, and writer Maria Thompson Corley. Dr. Thompson Corley was born in Jamaica and raised in Canada and has appeared as a solo and collaborative pianist on radio, television, and concert stages in North and Central America, the Caribbean, Bermuda, and Europe. Dr. Thompson Corley, thank you for being with me today. Thank you for being my guest on Musing. I'm so looking forward to our conversation. So, Dr. Corley, how would you describe yourself as an artist and what you do and what you strive to express in your output?
Well, I think that all of the arts to me are about storytelling, whether it's writing or interpreting music or whether it's creating music. It's not always like you'd have a beginning and a middle and end in the sense of writing an actual story. But with music, I may decide that I'm trying to convey a particular mood or idea, or it could be more abstract. But I think that's the goal, to take people on a journey, and whatever that journey may be, whether it's happy or sad or whatever. But yeah, that's what I think of it all as, having that common thread.
Beautiful. And so when I listen to your work, they're very programmatic. Whether it's a solo piece for piano or an art song, there's a lot of aspects of everyday existence and humanity in your work. Would you say that that's something that you strive for and that inspires you?
Some music is more experimental. For me, I'm always trying to convey something. I'm also a movie buff, so I do sort of feel that it's all grounded in something that either feels visual or, it's not completely abstract. So maybe that's where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. So this morning, I had the opportunity to sit down and listen to some of your piano pieces, and they are stunningly beautiful, first of all. Congratulations. I just really enjoyed spending some quality time with your work. But I couldn't help but feel that I was listening to something very intimate, that it was having this conversation with me personally, or yourself and the piano, or tell me about your relationship to the piano and your writing for it.
Oh, yeah, I love that idea. I guess I'm an ambivert or a recovering introvert. I don't think you need to recover from introversion, but the depth of expression that you can have when you don't actually have to use words is on a whole other level. And so, I always wanted to play the piano. My mom played the piano. My grandmother was a graduate of the New England Conservatory, which was unusual for, a Black woman back in the day, in the 30s. And that background is Bermudian, and so my grandmother taught kids from all over the island, but my mom was kind of the only one who took a little bit more from the lessons than her sisters. So, the piano was something that my mom had said, well, we probably had to learn. So my brother was taking lessons, and when I was 2, I guess I asked to take lessons, and my mom thought that was a little bit early. But, I've just always wanted to play. I guess I've always wanted to play the piano. So many times the piano has been like a dear friend. I'm not saying that, our relationship has always been there are times when it's not like I'm always dying to practice or anything like that, or I've always through the years, but there's a real joy, a real connection, a real opportunity, I guess, to share. And some of that sharing can be, with myself. I do hope that as I express things that, maybe I don't even fully know what they are, the deeper that I dig in things, and whether it's with creating music or playing music, the more that it can touch somebody. And what I tell my students is, nobody knows what you're thinking, because I think sometimes students are afraid to really express, and nobody knows what you're thinking. They just know that they felt something. Mm-hmm. And so that's my goal anyway.
So tell me about the various influences that I'm hearing and sensing in your work. I mean, I definitely hear jazz in your piano writing and the influence of, spirituals and scripture and literature, poetry. What inspires you and how do you go about incorporating that into your work?
Well, a lot of the things that I've written have words. Now, not all of them, obviously. So if it's something with words, then obviously the words dictate where I'm going with it. Lucid Dreaming, this piece, I think that was the first piano piece I wrote as an adult because I didn't think of myself as a composer. I'm taking a slight detour. I don't know if it was what I saw growing up, like it was all the great, dead white men who were wonderful. But it just never crossed my mind, even though I was making up music. And, I took a year of composition from a lady named Lydia Powles who used to teach in Edmonton. And, I took a year when I was about 14. It never occurred to me that I would be, a composer or should be a composer or I don't know. Once I got to this relatively advanced age, and then when I actually started composing things and not just doing arrangements, I've absorbed so much that I can be inspired by almost anything. Someone asked me, for example, to write a sextet, a wind sextet. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just knew how long it had to be. And one day, this idea comes to me, I hear a clarinet starting up on a high note and then doing this phrase. So I wrote it down and I put it away until I had a chance to really work on it. And it sort of became okay, well, from this idea, then what does this idea seem to imply that happens next? From that, I actually kind of created a piece which has a message. And I feel like it is easier for me to write with a specific thought or goal in mind. but I'm influenced by calypso. I grew up listening to that. I like to incorporate music that is from my heritage. I also grew up, as I said, listening to a lot of the so-called canon, which hopefully has expanded, and I think it has expanded finally. For example, one piece that I was suggested by a poem that a friend said, hey, I wrote this poem called Piano Man. I would love if you would not set the words, but maybe come up with a piano piece that goes with it. And so I thought, okay, I'm doing Chopin and Ellington. I didn't so much think of that before I came up with the opening gesture, but once I had come up with this gesture, which is kind of jazzy, I was thinking, well, who are the two piano men that come to mind if I'm doing this jazzy thing that reminds me of a little bit of Ellington, and Chopin is the other one who, came to me first. So, I've absorbed so much music over time. Like that sextet, the first movement ended up sounding kind of like Poulenc just because it wanted to, not because I was trying to. It's just this idea came to me and it just seemed like it had to be a little bit sounding kind of French. So what I find is like I'm an improviser, and I've never actually taken beyond that composition year, which he told me, you do a piece in the style of whoever. Anything that I've ever heard is fair game in the sense of drawing from influences. Now, I will say that having been on the CMC Council for Accountability for Change, which I think I just said that wrong. Anyway, I realized that there's some cultures that you can't borrow from, and you shouldn't borrow from. They're not, it's a whole different area, and it's deeply spiritual, and it's like, taking the communion out of the Catholic Church, and, it's just something that's that sacred to them. But most of the music that I have heard and that I will use is not in that category. And so as the pandemic went on, like I really started doing a lot of composing during the pandemic because I had time. And as we started coming out of it, and, there's just so much going on in the world. I find that when the world is heavy, I'm more likely to want to write something light, and not really channel, because I feel like there's enough heaviness out there. So, let me give people something that will make them feel, like smile for a moment, or, feel like maybe they want to dance, or, just something that's lighter. I mean, my tastes are very, very, very eclectic. I was always someone who, I loved that in Canada you do music history as you're doing your piano lessons, and it's just, you go for the exams, and you have to learn all these things of, Western European music history, which, when I was a kid, that was kind of all you were doing, maybe a little bit of jazz. I was listening to Prince. Like, I was a big fan of Prince, Stevie Wonder, and my dad loved Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and Ray Charles, and he also loved Simon and Garfunkel. Right. So and if I listened to the radio back then, it was because I was born in 1966. So Canadian content rule is a great thing, but at that time, not all of the Canadian content was as popular everywhere as it is now. Right. So there were things that I would hear that were, the popular songs of whoever. And my dad used to like to listen to CBC as he was driving us to and from piano lessons. So we'd listen to, like, sometimes they had like Celtic songs or something, and he was game for almost anything, I swear. So I've just been exposed to a lot. And when I was at University of Alberta, I took the ethnomusicology class, and I'm not saying that it's just, I don't know, there are all these things, and there's somewhere in there, and if it seems like it's the time for something to come out, then, that's what I'm going to go with. And, well, this is the way this piece seems like it needs to be, so that's, I guess, how it's going to go.
I love that you talked earlier about being an improviser, because that was exactly kind of the sense that I got, especially listening to your piano music, that it was very organic and that it was just unfolding in the moment, and you were very in the moment. And probably the next time you came to that piece, it would feel and sound slightly different, or you'd feel comfortable to, alter it in different ways because it was just so authentically your voice being expressed.
I'm sure you're not thinking that I'm just came fully formed out of my head and then I wrote it, but it's sort of like as I'm going, I'm making decisions about what's going to happen. So it doesn't feel like it's completely out there, but there are times when it's like, okay, what am I going to do next? Okay, oh, I should, and then it will come to me that way. It's not like everything that comes out, I'm sort of like, okay, I'm sold on this because this is what I thought of, and so therefore it's great, or something like that. I'm certainly going to revise. Improvisation, it's just the coolest superpower that you don't earn. It's just a thing that I was just able to do, and I am just so grateful for it because it's a wonderful gift, and I am thankful to God that He decided to give me that. Now, there have been times when I wish that I had the superpower of being a lawyer or some other thing that became more lucrative.
Absolutely, there's that too.
But I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, so I'm pretty convinced of that.
Absolutely. So a lot of your output, as you touched on earlier, is based on text and working with voice. I'm struck by a lot of the text that you have chosen. How do you go about selecting and creating, curating, collaborating on creating texts or selecting texts for your works?
There's a fair amount of them I've written myself,
right.
Which wasn't really the plan. I never thought of myself as someone who could write poetry either. And a former student, because I was a university professor in Tallahassee for a while, he knew of me as a writer because I had a published novel when I was a professor there. And so reached out to me on Facebook or something, and there was this writing group and invited me to join this group. And they were just doing poetry. So I was like, okay, well, everyone's posting a poem. That poem doesn't take as long. But anyway, when I started writing songs and like Grasping Water was the first song cycle I wrote. I wasn't really trying to write a song cycle. This is so, as I look back on these words, they're really kind of mortifying, except that I accept myself as someone who grows.
That's beautiful.
So, Well, the heart riddles, like there was this sort of on again, off again weird interaction that I was having with somebody, and I would complain to my friends on and off about this person who probably, I don't know if he was complaining about me or not, but anyway, so there was a rant that I sent to a friend who's a singer, and she said, "Oh, you should set this to music." It was an email. And so I took her at her word, and I said, "Well, if I do, you have to sing them." So I edited them, this thing into, I didn't even realize they were three things that started with questions until later. And then I called them three heart riddles. And so anyway, from there, a friend encouraged me to enter the Nats competition. And I said, well, it's not long enough. So I had to come up with some more songs. And I went into poems that I'd started writing because this person had invited me to do this thing. And then I, gathered a number of them that seemed to have a similar kind of a theme. And then, so that was how I started setting my own poems. And I had written a number of poems. And I've been asked, actually commissioned to write poems for singers saying, okay, I would like a poem sort of like this. And they haven't found the poem. And so, could you write a poem?
With zero expectations and zero agenda. Sometimes I think it would be nice to have expectations and know that they'll usually be met. Was the only person he was sent
I mean, if I'm not writing it myself, I'm looking for something probably that's not super duper long. I don't know. There's some poems that want to be sung and some poems that don't to me. I recently wrote a song cycle just because, which I love to do, which I do less of, is just writing something because I think I want to write this as opposed to someone paying me to write something.
Right.
Which is, I'm not complaining about that at all. I feel very blessed that people want to pay me to write stuff, but my brother, who was a poet and died in 1988, he had just turned 25. Some of his poetry I was aware of, and then my mom has been downsizing, and she discovered these poems that I know I'd never seen, and I don't think she'd seen either amongst his papers. I decided that I was going to write a song cycle, and there was one that had been published that I looked at and I was like, okay, I don't think that one, that one's not going to work. I can't think of that as being a song. But then I went back to it afterwards, and then something came to me. I was like, no, actually, this would be a song, and I think it's my favorite song. Typically, I'm not looking for an epic poem, and it has to have something that feels like music would add something, which doesn't mean it has to be a bad poem in that, it doesn't stand by itself, but it's a really nebulous thing. I'm not looking for a rhyme scheme because a lot of the poems I said don't rhyme. It has to capture enough of my imagination, soul, interest, whatever, that I think, okay, yeah, I really want to write a song to this poem. There's just something special about it that I want to live with this poem and maybe just share something else with this poem.
And perhaps the music can bring something, another aspect out of those words in the text.
Or it's like me having a conversation with the poem in a sense, I mean,
I love that.
In that, yeah, and hopefully I'm able to express what was meant. I mean, I don't have to understand absolutely, every thing like you have to analyze in school when they want you to analyze a poem, but there's something about it that I just feel like, okay, I feel this mood, and maybe a melody will start presenting itself to me at that point or something, and I'll, just go from there.
How does it feel to reimagine art song in your way? And do you think consciously about decolonizing this art form or modernizing? Well, I'm really curious what your perspective is on it.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the word art song because it implies that there's no artistry in doing other kinds of songs.
Right.
And if everybody could do other kinds of songs with the right kind of skill, then everybody would be, famous for doing those kinds of songs. So I really feel like, though, whatever you've been given, I'm not going to put a wall around it and say, well, that's not for me because of whatever. I mean, that to me is like I'm locking myself out of something. I'm a pianist, and I love the human voice. I love to collaborate with singers. So for me to write a song with piano and voice, even if it's in a Western European tradition of music, I don't feel like I just don't believe in the walls. I mean,
right.
I've written some that sound more like gospel, and so I will incorporate things that if it seems like that's what it needs to be, or even sometimes I'll just do it. Like it's like, okay, well, I was asked to set some biblical texts, and I mean, there are all kinds of church, so to speak, and so I decided that okay, this one I want it to sound like just an old-timey gospel song and she was good with melismas, and so I gave her a lot of, good bluesy melismas. But that's the thing. It's like I feel like whatever kind of music that I feel needs to happen with this song, that's what it needs to be. And so, like, for example, in The Color of Joy, Kanika Ambrose wrote a wonderful poem about Elias 511, referring to the streetcar. And so she talks about Kensington Market and how it's changed, and then, this idea of the neighborhood changed, and so the music to me changes from sounding sort of something that was more Jewish to something that sounds more Caribbean, because that's the heritage of the speaker. And so, why would I avoid incorporating those kind of rhythms and that kind of music? I just don't feel like it needs to be anything like, okay, well, that's not art song anymore, or I actually don't care if someone would say that. I just don't care. It's for piano and voice, and I feel like I'm expressing something that is inherent in the poetry.
palm tree, sipped young coconuts through a straw. The next day I looked down through the clouds at endless Patrick Alberta fields, and asked Mommy and Daddy, where are the trees? Where are the trees? When the world was white and the people were pink, I built snowmen and Daddy chained the tires so our car wouldn't slip on the ice. I pulled my toque down low and tried to school with Trixie Schneider. She got mad at a boy in second grade. I didn't know why, so I asked Mommy and Daddy, what is a nigger?
As far as like a self-conscious attempt to say, well, I can do this because I'm doing it this way and not that way. And maybe if I started this when I was younger, maybe I would feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
But at this stage of the game, you get to past a certain age and you're like, whatever, man, I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
And if you're, you can't tell me that I can't write a whatever it is. I mean, don't tell me that I can't write it or shouldn't be writing in a particular style. And as I said, the thing that wanted to sound like Poulenc, I was like, it wants to sound like Poulenc. I've heard Poulenc, and I'm not French, but, this is all, once you put this music out into the world, if it's available for people to listen to, it's available for people to be influenced by. I don't have to ask their permission to write music in whatever genre that I decide. It never made sense to me that there were people who could not create music in whatever genre you wanted, that was available. I mean, why would there be just one category of people who could create music in one genre and then everybody else had to be in another genre? And that goes with every genre. I mean, to like talk about Beyonce and country music or whatever, that was a big thing that people were talking with the Grammys, is like, well, they were offended. To me, that's just nonsense. So I don't feel like there's anything wrong with me wanting to write a song in a more classical genre. And no, I think it's fine.
I wanted to circle back. You mentioned spirituals earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a couple episodes ago, I featured an excerpt from your album Soul Sanctuary, which is all spirituals. Tell me about that experience of, working with this music and your collaborative partner.
Maria Clark was at Florida State University when I was a very, very young professor at Florida A&M University, both in Tallahassee. She said, she really loved my spirituals, and did I have any more? It was really her idea, Maria, just because she really liked my music, and I was very flattered by that. So the idea of working with the spiritual, from the time I was young, I heard them because my parents would play recordings of Roland Hayes and Paul Robeson, and they were in a group when they were at McGill University, which is where they met, that, sang West Indian songs as well, but they also did some spirituals. So, it was in the ether, and my mom was a church musician and stuff like that. So these were familiar, beloved melodies, and to me are some of the most beautiful melodies in the world, like Deep River, Can You Improve? No, you can't. Anyway, the idea of being able to do something to express, again, me in conversation with that spiritual, for Maria to do that, to ask me to do a recording with her of just spirituals and hymns, I don't know, it just seemed to me kind of out of the blue. I was really flattered. And so His Eyes on the Sparrow is something that was just improvised in the moment. We did 2 takes, and they were both, like with an agreement about what key and a slight, sort of like how many verses we were going to do. And then also there's another one on that recording, Lord I'll Go, which was the same thing. It was just in the moment, she's doing her thing, I'm doing my thing, and we just recorded it. And again, I think we did 2 takes of that one too, and we're able to maybe combine a little bit. But I don't know, it just speaks to my heart. It speaks to the whole weight of the DNA of being a Black person,
Mm-hmm.
The survival and the fact that some of them are up tempo, and I don't think I have any that are really fun. Well, there are moments of humor in some of them, but to be able to delve into that is just, I don't know, an honor and a wonderful, beautiful thing, I feel. Yeah.
So you were featured twice in the 2020 African Composers London virtual concert series, once as a solo performer and once as a collaborative pianist and writer. And then your recording Soulscapes 2 consisted of music by Black women from all over the diaspora. And this was released in November 2021, and it was listed as a top 12 not to miss classical release on some pretty high profile listings. So, given those things on like this large scale, high profile, how important is it to you personally to be able to tell your story and your experience as a Black woman through your art on your terms?
Oh, yeah, I think it's very important. And again, that recording came purely out of the pandemic. I don't know that I would have taken the time to write the pieces that I wrote for that and to learn some of those very killer pieces I learned for that recording. But yeah, I think it's very important. I mean, I think there's a whole realm of music that people are missing if they're not able to be exposed to, whoever is the composer. Now, ideally, we wouldn't have to think about this stuff so much, but that's kind of the way that it's been constructed by colonial mentality to separate everything into these categories, and that's just the way that it is. So on my own terms means that I'm not really trying to impress anybody by how I'm doing, what I'm playing. I'm not really thinking about whether somebody thinks I should be doing more of something or less of something. I'm just being, doing what I can do, and life is short and we don't know how long it's going to last. I mean, my brother died when he was 25, and at this stage of my life, I'm just, trying to find musical experiences, hopefully that feed my soul in some way, and hopefully I'm sharing them with people, and I hope that they get a little something sustenance from what I'm doing. And if not, then, there are other people out there who hopefully they're finding that their art feeds their souls. But I try not to be too self-conscious about it. I have my own standards of whether I feel like I've given my all with my, certain level of integrity, a certain level of commitment and expressiveness. And yeah, I guess that's all I can do, really.
Beautiful. Yeah. What does true representation and equalization on our stages look like to you?
There's going to be stuff that, if you're programming something, I don't think you have to pick a piece you don't like just because it's in this category. And on the flip side, if, we did the piece by blah, 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 and nobody liked it, so we're never doing another piece by an Asian woman again. We tried that, I just feel that if you are still reaching into that basket that everybody had been reaching into for generations,
literally centuries,
and not yes, exactly, and not looking at anything else, then you're just not trying. And yes. I think you should be trying, because music is about communication. It's not just about, okay, but we ran the numbers, and by the polls, we think we should be doing Bach, Beethoven, and Chopin, or whatever. I think you're denying the audience the opportunity to experience something new and potentially exciting to them, and also by playing it safe, you're just putting nails in the coffin, honestly.
Right.
You know, because we paint ourselves into a corner if we are not willing to evolve. Everything must evolve, otherwise it becomes extinct. That's when
Yes.
something becomes extinct. So
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, we've touched on quite a number of things in your output, but we haven't talked about your operas yet. Can you tell me about your approach to writing for these larger staged works as opposed to more intimate art song? Or no, I won't call it art song. You don't like that term, song cycles.
Well, no, I'm not going to be angry at you. I don't know that I've come up.
We'll have to
with a better
rebrand it.
term.
You rebrand
Yeah.
just for you.
Yeah, I mean, I am totally like shocked that I'm writing operas. I am shocked because I never aspired to write for an orchestra. I fell into composing, and people started asking me to do things, and based on the other things, and I would tell them I've never written for this instrument before, but by this point I had played collaboratively with every instrument in the orchestra from tuba to piccolo, and including marimba. So, I was very, in that way, familiar, and I know people, and so I would reach out to them and say, hey, does this part work? So as far as an opera, to try to answer your question, how do I think about a big project like that? I mean, I think it has to have some cohesiveness, and so I'm looking for ways to make things cohesive in as well as, obviously you can't have just the same tune over and over again. But, I mean, in the midst of having come up with melodies for these words that I get, then I'll start, some of them will present pretty quickly. Other ones I'm like, okay, I don't have anything for this yet. I'll go back and figure it out later. And then I start typically with that. Every once in a while there are scenes where I'll start with instrumental gesture, and then figure out, what goes with that. But in that, mood setting thing that I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Well, and to me, as an outsider looking in, opera is a natural fit for you because you are, a prolific writer yourself, and you have a critically acclaimed novel out in the world, Letting Go. And how does that all factor into, your creative output, and that you are an educator, a composer, a pianist, a performer, a writer? Like you're so multifaceted. How does and how do you nurture all of those parts of yourself?
That's a good question. I don't always at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends called me a plate spinner, so if I'm not doing one for too long, then I start to miss it. But I can't go full tilt on everything at once. So, when I'm preparing for, I have a big concert coming up in July, so I was, working on the first draft, doing some revisions on the first draft of the John Lewis opera, practicing a little bit less, but, doing the technique and doing a little something. And then some other things will have to go on the back burner when that comes to the fore. And then sometimes I just stay up a little bit too late and do a little bit of writing. And for whatever reason if something starts starving too much, then something is missing. So that's, I guess, the answer is just a little bit here, a little bit there, but I can't do it all at once.
Right.
If I can write some nice, lovely melodies, and hopefully people will find themselves singing things that they perhaps just get stuck in their head or something, that would be a nice thing to happen. But I just feel like music is such a great way of communicating so much more and words. I value words. I love words. They just work on different planes, I think, of our brains.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Maria Thompson Corley, thank you so much for being my guest on Musing today. That's a beautiful way to end, just with the intrinsic power of music and words and what can happen when we combine them, as you do so artfully. Thank you again for sharing your art and your words and your presence here on Musing. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. My name is Janna Sailor, and it's been such a delight to share music and ideas on this platform. Musing is a production of the Canadian Music Centre Prairie Region and is produced on the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 nations, which include the Siksika, Kainai, Pikainai, Stoney Nakoda, Chiniki, Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Tsuut'ina nations, and the Métis Nations 5 and 6. Thank you for supporting live music and Canadian artists in your community. Take care, and until next time.